We are ending this year with 3 stories burned into our brain. The Bondi Beach Hanukkah shooting in Australia, where gunmen opened fire at a menorah lighting service in the sand, killing at least 11 people and injuring dozens more. There were also 2 horrific shootings at universities that were apparently linked, where a former graduate student in physics at Brown University seems to have killed a former classmate who's now a professor at MIT, as well as opening fire in the building where he once studied physics. And then there's the killing of Rob and Michelle Reiner in their own home in Los Angeles, with their son now charged with 2 counts of murder. If these are the stories at the top of your feed, then it is tempting to think that public spaces aren't safe and even elite institutions can't protect you. I mean, even families are collapsing into violence. But here's the other angle. Before we get into it, my name is Megan McArdle. I'm a columnist of the Washington Post, and this is my show, Reasonably Optimistic, a podcast about why, despite all the bad news and the blackpilling, you should still be bullish on the most disruptive ideas in the world, including America itself. The internet's full of people telling you that nothing matters, that we're finished, America is over. Reasonably Optimistic's where we push back on that. Not with denial, but with evidence and history and serious arguments for why the future is still worth betting on. If that sounds like you, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Leave a rating wherever you get your podcasts. And share this episode with someone you know who's starting to give up. The goal here isn't denial or naivete. It's to stay reasonably optimistic in a world that makes doom the default. Now back to the episode. The thing to remember is that news has a bias towards things that are unusual and scary. But if you zoom out from that bias and you try to look at things objectively, 2025 looks less like the end of America and more like a messy, unequal, but still functioning society where crime's falling, life expectancy is rising again, and the economy's growing, not shrinking. That contrast is the point of this video. Not to deny how dark those stories are, or even to say you have no reason to be worried, but to refuse the lie that those things are the whole story. You might have seen headlines about a weird economy this year. We've had a lot of whiplash with GDP and tariffs and a government shutdown that, among other things, scrambled our official statistics. And you might have seen a lot of talking head segments on cable news or elsewhere about recession risks. Now look, humans are primed to look for risks. It's natural. It's even healthy. That's how you survive when you're on the savannah being chased by an elk. But that tendency to make sure that things are safe also sometimes primes us to turn messy, difficult statistics into a black pill story. The numbers are fake and the system is rigged and real prosperity is over. But the hard numbers, that's not the story they're telling us. Real U.S. GDP grew at a 3.8% annual rate in the second quarter of 2025, after a small contraction in the first quarter, to be sure. But consumer spending and private domestic demand also increased. Inflation ran about 2 to 2.6%. That's not ideal. It's still above the Fed's target. We'd like that to be lower, but it's a lot closer to normal than it is to runaway inflation. That combination of positive real growth with moderating inflation, that's not a collapse. It might not be exactly what we wanted, but it's still pretty good. Talking about this isn't cheerleading for the Trump administration, nor is it denying the problems we do have. It's just about reminding people there is a difference between I feel anxious about the economy and the job market and the real economy literally stopped working. If you let every glitchy data release turn into America's in freefall, then you end up blind to the fact that underneath the noise, millions of people are still producing and consuming and building things every day. You probably saw the headline that unemployment hit the highest in years, or that job growth is stalling. If you stop there, the story is terrifying. But look one level deeper. The jobless rate ticked up into the mid 4% range. The labor market didn't add as many jobs as we would have liked, but it still added roughly 64,000 jobs in November, which not only beat many economists' expectations, but wasn't even that bad when you consider that because of deportations, the labor force is actually shrinking. Private sector hiring remained positive, and forecasts from the Federal Reserve Bank still point to modest job growth in 2026, not a free fall. That's what a cooling labor market looks like. We don't have to love having a cooling labor market, but we shouldn't think of it as a job apocalypse. Black pill voices treat any move away from the tightest labor market on record as proof that the party's over. And okay, the party might be quieting down a little bit, but most people in America who want jobs right now have one. Being honest about a slight slowdown without collapsing into fatalism is key if you want people to fight for better conditions rather than checking out entirely. Bondi Beach, Brown University, MIT, the Reiner's house. If your mental picture of public safety is built from those clips, then the conclusion is simple, which is that violence is everywhere now and we live in a uniquely dangerous era. But the national picture on crime in the United States is moving in the opposite direction. The Council on Criminal Justice recently released its mid-year 2025 report. They looked at 30 cities. They found homicides were down by 17% compared to the first half of 2024. That's 327 fewer killings this year in just 30 cities. Now, you might say, but that's coming down from a huge spike during the pandemic, and you would be right. We had a spike. It was bad. But let's look at 2019, because those same cities still, even compared to 2019, had 14% fewer homicides. They had double-digit drops in gun assaults and in robbery. Broader FBI and real-time data suggest that the United States is on track for the lowest murder rate on record. Violent crime and property crime are also way below their 1990 peaks. So yes, those attacks, they were as terrible as it comes. But that doesn't mean that they're a harbinger of something worse. It doesn't mean that the risk to you is rising. These were terrible outliers that happened against a backdrop of falling crime, not rising mayhem. If you don't look at the long-term trend, if you only show people these outliers, their worst nightmares, you don't just mislead them, because you make it easier to sell authoritarian solutions and permanent panic. And you fray the bonds that hold us together. Because one of the most important things to a country is social trust, not just in our government, but in each other. We have to insist on both halves of the truth. Some events are unspeakably bad, but they are less common than they used to be. That's how you defend reality-based politics against people who profit from fear. When a famous figure like Rob Reiner is killed, someone whose movies we all watched and loved, or even when someone you know was lost to an overdose, or to COVID, or to something else that's in the news, it can feel like every direction you look is more death, more sickness, more decline. The black pill version of that is that we are a sick society and we are getting sicker all the time. But the population level data, they say something much more complicated. U.S. life expectancy at birth rose to 78.4 years in 2023. That's up almost a full year from 2022. And age-adjusted death rates fell about 6%. Nor was that just happening to some special privileged group of people. Death rates declined for every major racial group, every major ethnic group, and for all ages 5 and up. Now, it's not all roses. Our life expectancy, it's still below our pre-pandemic levels, and we need to do what we can to extend that. We're still worse than peer countries in some measures, but we're headed in the right direction, from shorter lives towards longer ones. The black pill narratives, they depend on flattening time. Every setback is permanent. Every shock is destiny. Tracking life expectancy is a way of saying, you know what? Sometimes collectively, we fight back and we win ground back. Now, that's not going to comfort anyone who lost a loved one to violence or to illness, but it still matters. When people decide that things only go in one direction and that direction is the wrong one, they decide that nothing can be improved and they're just going to live like nothing matters. I'm sure you've all seen a steady stream of pieces about how technology is destroying our young people. They're not going out. They're not going to church. They're just stuck to their phones. And AI is going to take their jobs. It's going to kill their attention span. And it is going to unleash a tidal wave of scams and grift. Look, some of these things are problems we do have to solve. Young people are lonelier. They are struggling more to make personal connections. And it's easy to turn that into the machines are making us dumber. Well, the machines get smarter and culture's over. But the real picture is stranger and more mixed than that. Young adults do absolutely. They spend less time socializing and more solo screen time, but they're also drinking less. They're having fewer car crashes. And not only that, they're actually more skeptical of moderate drinking than their elders were. AI usage has gone from niche to mainstream. Surveys show that roughly 2/3 of Americans use it at least several times a week, and a quarter of all workers are using it at least weekly in their jobs. Now, that's perhaps concerning for those who haven't mastered the tools yet. On the other hand, the tools are actually pretty easy to use, and they have the potential to unleash an incredible wave of productivity that can make us all richer, maybe healthier, maybe, I don't know, we get to travel to Mars. Here's another way that technology is actually massively improving our lives. Self-driving taxis in California and Austin and Florida are now logging over 4 million passenger miles a month. Companies like Waymo are doing more than 250,000 rides a week across several cities with safety records that are incredibly better than human drivers. A massive decrease, not just in the number of accidents that cause injuries, which are the accidents we worry most about. Not only that, most of the accidents that the Waymos are involved in turn out to be the fault of the human in the other car. These aren't the numbers of a frozen, paralyzed civilization, and they're also not the numbers of a civilization that's heading towards its doom. If you only listen to the black pill narrators, every new technology is a straight line to dystopia. Every cultural shift is proof of moral collapse. But the history of technology and culture is mostly people muddling through. Technology does change culture, and some of those changes are bad because we have to learn to adapt to new ways of doing things. The printing press kicked off the religious wars of Europe, but if you look around, you will notice we are not still killing each other over whether the Protestants or the Catholics are right about the Bible. We figured out new institutions that were capable of letting us all live together, not just in harmony, but in the most amazing prosperity that mankind has ever seen. Pointing that out isn't denial. It's a way of arguing that the future is something that has its fears and its challenges, but it's not something that we're helpless against. It's something that we're going to shape. We can make good choices about how to embrace what's coming, or we can make bad ones. That power is in our hands. And to use that power effectively, we have to know what's really going on. We have to look at the downsides and the upsides and figure out how we minimize the downsides, maximize the upsides, and negotiate a path to the best possible future for all of us. It's the end of the year, and of course, at the end of the year, it's always tempting to look backwards. But the end of one year is the beginning of a new year. And I, for one, am really looking forward to spending that new year with you. Please come back and rejoin us in the new year. In the meantime, follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to rate us and please leave a review. And with that, I will see you all in the new year.